What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to give you guys a very quick update about the markets breakdown. President Trump just said that's very important involving his policies. What you should be watching for as time goes on the charts. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. Deposits $2,000 and you're guaranteed 25 in total, and deposit $5,000 and you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends on June 3rd, very soon, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening with this market. So, looking at SPY, as you could tell, we're trying to make a higher low here, and this has been pushing up very nicely. But we're in a very pivotal zone because as SPY hits this 570 to 580 area, there's some tough resistance. And then simultaneously, there's a lot of things going on right now that could shake or break the markets. So, let's talk about how this is really developing so far. The first thing that's worth mentioning is the fact that the US and China are beginning their trade talks this weekend, as we have the US Treasury Secretary going to Geneva, Switzerland, which is where they're going to be negotiating and talking about trade. Now, we're still yet to hear too many updates about that. We're still waiting for that. But keep in mind that for China, they're making a big shift in their economy. So China knows that there's going to be a lot of pain coming for them, and they're already cutting rates by about 10 basis points. They also increased the stimulus for their economy because they are anticipating some pain to come as a result of these tariffs, right? And then on top of this, with what's going on, this incentivizes them to essentially negotiate with the US and try to get those tariffs to go down. President Trump said that he is willing to decrease the tariffs on China to about 80%. He said that on Friday. Obviously, the market liked that as trade talks are continuing. Right now, there's about a 145% tariff on China, but obviously it depends on the products and there's a lot more details on that. But you guys understand my points that the cap, the absolute top, could start to go down for a lot of these different products once we get some kind of deal. Now, with the tensions that have been arising, President Trump did say a couple of things today about China, just a couple of things I'm going to read. President Trump said that we were losing hundreds of billions of dollars with China. Now we're essentially not doing business with China. Therefore, we're saving hundreds of billions of dollars. It's very simple. Then President Trump was asked about the tariffs. Do you believe that Americans are in a tough position? Is that what Americans should expect? Is it not going to be easy, right? Some hard times. President Trump responded and said that I said we're going to have a transition period, and during this transition period, it's going to be worth it. Then, when asked about the economy, President Trump went on about how we were losing $5 to $6 billion a day in the previous administration's time. Now, once again, the U.S. is going to come out on top. So he's saying the same things again about China and such, and he's defending the reasoning behind increasing the tariffs that he has. He also mentioned that he wants to keep the 10% baseline tariff on different countries. But when it comes to the changes that are coming, we'll have to see what happens between the US and China. We might find out a little bit later on. So, for the way the market's moving, I just wanted to say that we are bullish technically. Okay. We're still technically bullish because SPY is making higher highs and higher lows. It is stair stepping its way up. Unless we see SPY lose this 555 area, if we lose this, I could be looking for a move down towards like 544. But just keep in mind, guys, that I do think that there will eventually be some kind of pullback move, but I don't think we're ready yet. We need to see confirmation first to really see it. So, with the way SPY is going, there's lots of different ways this could pan out. Will there be another crash period? Will there not be? Well, honestly, there's way too many moving parts right now. There's all this news with China. There's news about what's happening with President Trump's tariffs, negotiations with India. The list goes on. There's just so many factors really affecting this market. So, if you're like a really big bull, what could be happening is even if we do go a little bit higher towards this resistance right here between 575 to 580, right? There's no guarantee we're just going to break out and start launching to all-time highs. If you are a big bull, though, what could happen is even in the bullish case, we could get some kind of pullback move to 550 to 544. And then if we do get some kind of bounce from there, we could still be forming an inverse head and shoulders to push to all-time highs. That's going to be like a more bullish case. But of course, this is very dependent on different things. Now, if we get a bad catalyst, whether it's because of the tariff negotiations or if there's any other bad piece of news, if President Trump announces new tariffs on pharmaceuticals in different industries, if it does cause some kind of pullback, whatever the news is, right? I don't know exactly what the news will be, but a little bit more of a bearish case would be in case we do start some kind of pullback move. I do think we could initially go a bit higher. It is possible we try to retest this high over here, even if we try to push for like 580. we could still see some kind of pullback. It's still very possible, and there's no guarantee we stop at 544. We could come all the way down towards 520 instead to fill that gap, and then we could once again attempt to make a recovery move during the summer period, just like that. So there's like two scenarios I'm looking at as the most likely ones, whether we get a small pullback or not. But I do think there's a very, very good chance we could be looking for a move like this. Either we get some kind of dip like this, or we see a smaller one. Now, if you want to get a crash, if you want to see the market dump back down to these lows, we need a very, very bad catalyst. We need some bad news to come out to cause this to happen. If you want to see SPY retest these lows, we need a bad catalyst. As of right now, we don't really have that. If the US enters a recession, though, as soon as like in the next upcoming months, though, as we already got a negative GDP growth rate, that could be a catalyst, but we just don't have the information quite yet, which is why we have to take this one day at a time. So, the best thing to do is just take it one day at a time, and then we'll have to see how things go. When you look at SPY, we still have this gap over here. So I do believe there will come a time we do return to these like 520 areas, but I can't guarantee you if we're going to be making new lows or not. It depends on all these different factors. A recession could cause another crash, but like I said before, we have to wait and see in a market like this. If we're not getting too much bad news, if the news is like neutral, obviously the market will attempt to go a little bit higher, but we will see how things go. So there is a bearish divergence developing here, and there's also a bullish divergence on the VIX. We also have a bearish divergence relative to the Nasdaq and S&P 500 because the Nasdaq's trying to break its highs, whereas on SPY we haven't really done that, nor has ES. But we could continue to push. Like if we get a good piece of news involving China, I don't know yet. I think I'll get more information about this tomorrow. However, the trade negotiations go with China. But even if we go a little bit higher, there's going to be a big period of risk here between 570 and 575, which is why we could see this bearish divergence right over here cause some kind of pullback move to at least 550. Even if we get the pullback move, we could still be forming either an inverse head and shoulders on SPY, or we could be coming down to like 520 to fill that gap. Either way, I do anticipate a move back down to 550 coming soon. I just don't know exactly when we're going to get that transition yet, and we have to see where SPY ends up pivoting. So we don't know yet. We have to watch for confirmation, but that's all we're seeing for now. Do I think the stock market's going to crash? The answer is I cannot make promises about a market like this because of how crazy everything is. One day we're dumping, the next day we're pumping with all this tariff talk. One day the market's choppy with even Jerome Powell giving a speech, and the next day the market pumps with President Trump announcing new things. So I do believe we will eventually dump to the 520s again. I do believe it's going to happen, but I can't promise you if we're going to make new lows yet. There's a good chance it could happen because of the recession, but we'll have to take it one step at a time, right? We have to wait and see how things end up going. But that's the best thing I can really tell you, right? I can't predict everything that President Trump will say. I can't predict everything that's going to come out in the news. So the best thing to do is just take this one step at a time, and we'll just have to see what happens. So I am eyeing, and this is what I think is going to happen. We're either going to get this like inverse head and shoulders like pattern on SPY, just like this, before we continue to push towards all-time highs, or we dump even more back down to fill this gap, and then it takes much longer for us to really get that move back up if we come down to fill this gap like this. I am pointing upwards as we could go a little bit higher first, but then I do anticipate some kind of sell-off move. That's what I think is very likely, but watch for confirmation. The QQQ has a very similar setup. So what's interesting about the triple Q is that we also happen to have like this inverse head and shoulders like pattern. We need to break 494 to get closer to like 500. If we can't do that, there's going to be a risk of us returning to at least the 465 area. I could be looking for a small pullback like that. We could retest the high at 494 to 500, but then we could pull back a bit. Then we'll see if we get some kind of like V-shaped move as we have an inverse head and shoulders that could be forming. If not, if we don't bounce off 466, we could be dipping a little bit lower. So I am anticipating a move like this as of right now, either this or we kind of push a bit more before we come down to fill this gap. And then we could try to bounce again like that. So that's what I think is very likely to happen. However, if you want to make new lows, like I said before, we need some kind of really bad catalyst to get this market to dump. We don't really have it yet unless we enter a recession or whatever the new catalyst is going to be. So we're just going to wait and see. But that's what I'm seeing on the QQQ, at least for the time being, looking at the current setup. So could I see us go a bit higher? Yes, but then I do anticipate some kind of pullback move as we have a big bearish divergence developing. Looking at ES, it's the same thing essentially. So the problem with ES is we have a very tough resistance at the 200 EMA at 57.58. 57.50 to like 5,800 is going to be really tough to break. I don't know if we're just going to break it instantly. If we do get some kind of pullback move like this towards like 55.50 or so, we'll see if that leads to a bounce. If not, we could be dumping even more down to fill this gap towards like 5,300 before we get some kind of bounce. So either way, guys, we have a tough resistance at the 200 EMA. This is a very, very interesting level. And I do think we could go a little bit higher, but then be very, very careful because there could be a pivot coming, even on ES. On NQ, it's the same thing, essentially. I'm looking, once again, for the possible inverse head and shoulders for like the more bullish case. This is a tough resistance at the 200 EMA. Will we come down to like just under 19,000 before we start to bounce like this? Or do we dump to fill this gap over here? So ever since we got this breakout, I'm basically eyeing another gap all the way down towards 18,300. Do we kind of push like this towards 20,400 and see us dump to fill this gap? And then we bounce off that. That's going to be like another case. Um, but like I said before, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of us making new lows. That could also happen, but I just don't see the catalyst yet to really get there, right? Even with what Jerome Powell was saying, so far the market hasn't dumped yet, unless it's going to happen later. Jerome Powell was quite hawkish. He also mentioned that the Fed is not ready to cut rates or to do anything until they see what happens with the tariffs. So there's not much going on until we figure that out. What else could be affecting the market is big tech. So like I said in my earlier videos, Meta, like it's doing well, but as you could tell, it's getting very heavy at the 600 area, especially as we have this gap below. So this could not be the best for the markets, as we're starting to turn a little bit on Meta. And then you have other stocks like Amazon. Amazon's actually a bit more bullish looking. This could try to get closer to 200 with the Chinese deal as we have like a bullish wedge. So this is still showing more strength. This could be decent for us. But then you have stocks like Apple, which are still showing lots of consolidation right now. But on the daily time frame, as you could tell, our PPO is a little bit more negative. We're lacking some volume here. So we'll see if this turns down again. I'd be very careful with that. Then you have stocks like Nvda. It's at some tough resistance at 117.4. We need to break that to push to 120. If we can't, we could be returning to this blue trend line or even deeper to fill this gap. So I'd be very, very careful, right? I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of small pullback with all this that's going on. Tesla is very bullish looking. It's actually very strong, but the issue is that 300 is going to be kind of tough. So we could retest 292 and we'll see if we bounce or not. But like I said before, guys, I'm going to be very, very careful with this market. So yes, we could go a little bit higher, but SPY really lacks volume and we have a bearish divergence for now. So we'll see if we get a very temporary minor pullback or not. We could go a little bit higher first before that pullback comes. And then if not, will it be a bigger pullback? We'll just have to wait and see what the catalyst is. As of right now, the most likely case is going to be that SPY either like pushes a bit higher, then returns to 550 before bouncing, or it dips a little bit lower to fill the gap in the 520s and then it bounces off that, right? We might not be making new lows unless we get some really, really bad news, whether it's a new war, whether it's something really, really negative involving the tariffs, then it's possible for us to make new lows, maybe a recession. We're not ready yet. So, like I said in my previous videos, we're going to take it one step at a time. We'll see what happens moving forward. But this is going to be my very, very, very quick update for now on President Trump. So we'll see what happens involving the US and China with these trade talks. Do we get some big updates by tomorrow? What does President Trump tweets tomorrow afternoon? Typically, he gives us some updates on Sunday, so we'll see what he has to say. Until then, be patient, my friends. Thank you all so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I'll be back tomorrow with another update. Thank you again, and peace out.